Captain Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the massive warship Retribution, staring at the blue marble that had once been humanity's home. Earth looked peaceful from this distance, its white clouds swirling over familiar continents. But Sarah knew better. She had studied the historical records, watched the archived footage, and heard the stories passed down through 3,000 years of exile. The bridge communicator crackled to life. Captain Chen to the command center. Admiral Morrison wants to see you. Sarah took one last look at Earth before turning away. Her boots echoed against the metal floors as she walked through corridors filled with thousands of humans who had never seen their ancestral home. The Retribution was one of 50 ships in the return fleet, each carrying survivors and descendants of the Great Exodus. The command center buzzed with activity. Holographic displays showed tactical information, ship positions, and, most importantly, the alien defensive networks surrounding Earth. Admiral Morrison stood at the center of it all, his weathered face showing the weight of command. At 90 years old, he was one of the few people alive who remembered the early days of exile. "Sarah, come here," the Admiral called. "I want you to see this." She approached the main display, which showed a detailed scan of Earth's surface. Where once great human cities had stood, alien structures now dominated the landscape. The Zephyrians had built their crystalline towers and flowing biodomes across every continent. They had reshaped humanity's world to suit their own needs. 3,000 years, Morrison said quietly. 3,000 years since they drove us from our home. Since they declared humanity too dangerous to exist on Earth. Sarah nodded. Every human child learned the history. In the year 2157, humanity had reached the stars. They had colonized dozens of worlds and made contact with alien civilizations. Most first contacts had been peaceful, leading to trade and cultural exchange. But the Zephyrians were different. The Zephyrians possessed technology far beyond human understanding. They could manipulate matter at the molecular level, create living ships, and bend spacetime to their will. They were also incredibly arrogant. When they encountered humanity, they saw a young, aggressive species that might one day challenge their dominance of the galaxy. "Tell me about the Purge again," Sarah said, though she knew the story by heart. Morrison's eyes grew distant. The Zephyrians came without warning. Their ships appeared over every human world simultaneously. They gave us a choice: abandon Earth forever and restrict ourselves to the outer rim worlds, or face complete extinction. The Admiral gestured to another display showing the current positions of human colonies. Most of our people chose survival. We loaded our ships with as many people as we could save and fled to the edge of known space. But some stayed behind to fight. Sarah remembered the recordings of humanity's last stand on Earth. Brave men and women had faced impossible odds against Zephyrian war machines. They had fought not to win, but to buy time for the evacuation fleets. None of them survived. The Zephyrians kept their word, Morrison continued. They let us live on the rim worlds. But they also made sure we could never return. They placed defensive satellites around Earth and stationed patrol fleets throughout the Sol system. Any human ship that came too close was destroyed without warning. For 3,000 years, humanity had lived in exile. They had built new cities on distant worlds, developed new technologies, and slowly rebuilt their civilization. But they never forgot Earth. They never forgave the Zephyrians for stealing their birthright. "That changes today," Sarah said. Morrison smiled grimly. "Yes, it does. Thanks to our new allies." Sarah turned as footsteps approached. Ambassador Vextar of the Korean Republic entered the command center, his forearms moving in the gesture humans had learned meant respect. The Koreans looked like giant insects, with chitinous exoskeletons and compound eyes, but they had proven to be humanity's most loyal friends in the galaxy. Admiral Morrison, Captain Chen, Vextar spoke through his translation device. "My fleet stands ready to support your return to Earth." The Korean fleet consisted of 200 warships, each one a masterpiece of biological engineering. Their ships grew rather than being built, forming living hulls that could repair themselves and adapt to different combat situations. More importantly, Korean technology had finally given humanity a way to fight the Zephyrians on equal terms. "We appreciate your support, Ambassador," Morrison said. "But I want to be clear about something. This is humanity's fight. We're grateful for your help, but Earth belongs to us. Vextar's antennae twitched in what humans had learned was amusement. Of course, Admiral. The Korean Republic has no claim to your world. We simply believe the galaxy is better when the Zephyrians do not control everything they see. Sarah studied the tactical displays again. The plan was complex but necessary. The Zephyrian defenses around Earth were formidable, built up over 3 millennia. Direct assault would be suicide, even with Korean support. Instead, they would use humanity's greatest strength, their ability to think creatively and adapt quickly to changing circumstances. Phase 1 begins in 12 hours, Morrison announced to the assembled officers. Captain Chen will lead the advance reconnaissance force. Their job is to probe the outer defenses and gather real-time intelligence. Sarah felt the familiar mixture of fear and excitement that came before battle. She had spent her entire career preparing for this moment. Every human in the fleet had trained for the day they would return to Earth. My ship will take point, Sarah said. The Defiance and Vengeance will provide support. Morrison nodded. Remember, this is reconnaissance only. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary. We need to know what we're facing before we commit the full fleet. The next few hours passed in a blur of final preparations. Sarah returned to her ship, the heavy cruiser Retribution, and gathered her senior officers. The bridge crew had worked together for 5 years, preparing for this mission. They knew each other's strengths and weaknesses better than family. All right, people, Sarah said as her officers assembled. You know what we're here to do. In 12 hours, we're going to take the first step toward reclaiming our home. I won't lie to you, this is going to be dangerous. The Zephyrians have had 3,000 years to prepare for our return. Commander Rodriguez, her tactical officer, raised his hand. Captain, what are our rules of engagement? Standard defensive protocols, Sarah replied. We're here to gather information, not start the war early. But, if the Zephyrians fire on us, we have permission to defend ourselves. Lieutenant Kim, the communications officer, looked nervous. Captain, what if they try to communicate with us? Sarah had thought about this possibility many times. If they want to talk, we listen. But, remember, these are the beings who drove our ancestors from Earth. They had their chance for peaceful coexistence 3,000 years ago. The hours ticked by slowly. Sarah made her rounds through the ship, checking on her crew and making sure all systems were ready. The Retribution was a powerful warship, armed with the latest human and Korean weapons technology. Her hull was reinforced with Korean biometal that could absorb and redistribute energy from enemy weapons. Her engines used human fusion technology enhanced with Korean gravitic manipulation. Most importantly, her crew was ready for anything. These weren't the frightened refugees who had fled Earth 3 millennia ago. These were the descendants of survivors, hardened by centuries of struggle and united by a burning desire for justice. Sarah found herself in the ship's memorial room, where holographic displays showed images from Earth's history. Pictures of the great cities that once were, the natural wonders that humanity remembered from ancient films and stories, and, most soberly, images from the final battle when brave humans made their last stand. We're coming home, she whispered to the images. The alert klaxon sounded throughout the ship. It was time. Sarah returned to the bridge as her crew took their positions. The main screen showed the approach to the Sol system, still light years away but growing closer every second. Long-range sensors were already picking up the edges of the Zephyrian detection network. All ships report ready, Captain, Commander Rodriguez announced. Sarah settled into her command chair and opened a channel to the fleet. All ships, this is Captain Chen. Today we begin humanity's return to Earth. Our ancestors were forced to flee their home, but they never surrendered their claim to it. Today we honor their memory and begin to reclaim what was stolen from us. She paused, looking around at her bridge crew. These people had volunteered for what might be a suicide mission. They deserved to know why. The Zephyrians believed they could erase humanity from our birth world. They thought 3,000 years would make us forget who we are and where we came from. They were wrong. We are still human. Earth is still our home. And, today we begin to take it back. Cheers echoed across the communication channels from 50 human ships and 200 Korean vessels. After 3 millennia of exile, humanity was going home. Jump drives charging, reported Lieutenant Park from the navigation station. Sarah watched the energy readings climb on her display. In moments, they would enter hyperspace and begin the final approach to Sol. There would be no turning back after this point. All ships, prepare for jump, Sarah commanded. The stars on the main screen began to blur and stretch as the jump drives engaged. Sarah felt the familiar sensation of reality bending around her as the ship entered hyperspace. When the stars snapped back into focus, they would be in the Sol system for the first time in 3,000 years. The last thing Sarah saw before the jump was Earth, still distant but growing larger. Soon she would see it up close, and humanity would finally come home. The jump completed with a violent shudder that ran through every deck of the Retribution. Sarah gripped her command chair as alarms began blaring across the bridge. The main display flickered to life, showing their new position at the edge of the Sol system. "Report!" Sarah commanded. "We're 2 light hours from Earth," Lieutenant Park announced, his voice tight with concentration. "Sensors are detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system." Commander Rodriguez worked frantically at his tactical station. "Captain, you need to see this. The Zephyrians haven't just built defenses around Earth. They've transformed the entire solar system." The main screen shifted to show a tactical overview of Sol. Where humanity remembered a simple system with 9 planets and an asteroid belt, something far more complex had taken shape. Massive artificial structures connected the planets like a vast web of metal and energy. Saturn's rings had been converted into manufacturing platforms. Jupiter's moons now bristled with defensive installations. Most shocking of all, Mars was gone. "Where is Mars?" Sarah asked, though she feared the answer. "Unknown, Captain," Rodriguez replied. "Long-range scans show debris where the planet should be. It appears the Zephyrians dismantled it for raw materials." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Mars had been humanity's first colony beyond Earth, home to 50 million people when the exile began. The colonists had chosen to stay and fight rather than flee. Now their entire world had been strip-mined out of existence. "Incoming transmission," Lieutenant Kim announced. "It's from Admiral Morrison." The Admiral's face appeared on a secondary screen, his expression grim. "All reconnaissance ships, we're picking up movement from the inner system. It looks like our arrival didn't go unnoticed." Sarah studied her sensor displays. Energy spikes were registering near Earth's orbit, consistent with ships powering up weapons and engines. After 3,000 years of peace, the Zephyrians were preparing for war. "Captain Chen," Morrison continued, "take your group in closer. We need detailed scans of their defensive positions before they have time to fully mobilize." "Understood, Admiral," Sarah replied. "We'll get you that intelligence." She closed the channel and turned to her crew. "You heard the Admiral. Plot a course for the inner system, maximum stealth protocols." The next several hours tested everyone's nerves. The Retribution and her escort ships crept deeper into Sol, using every stealth technology humanity and their Korean allies had developed. They hid in asteroid shadows, masked their engine signatures, and transmitted only in tight beam bursts. The closer they got to Earth, the more the scale of Zephyrian construction became apparent. They had built a ring of stations around the sun itself, harvesting stellar energy on an unimaginable scale. Automated mining ships stripped resources from every asteroid and comet in the system. Most disturbing of all, Earth itself was surrounded by a sphere of defensive platforms, each one the size of a small city. "Captain," Rodriguez called out quietly, "I'm reading organic signatures from those platforms. They're not just machines, they're alive." Sarah had studied Zephyrian biotechnology during her officer training. Their most advanced weapons were grown rather than built, creating semi-intelligent systems that could adapt and evolve during battle. If Earth was protected by living defenses, the coming fight would be even more challenging. "Range to Earth?" she asked. 600 million kilometers and closing, Park replied. At this distance, Earth looked like any other planet, a small blue dot against the starfield. But sensors were beginning to pick up details that made Sarah's heart race. The continents were still recognizable, though covered with alien structures. The oceans remained blue, though artificial islands dotted their surfaces. "Wait," Kim said suddenly, pressing her earpiece closer. "I'm picking up something strange. There are radio transmissions coming from Earth's surface." Sarah turned to face the communications station. "What kind of transmissions?" They're human," Kim said, her voice barely above a whisper. Old Earth languages, English, Mandarin, Spanish. But, the signals are very weak, like they're being heavily suppressed. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. After 3,000 years, there were still humans on Earth. Are you sure? Sarah asked. Kim nodded, tears streaming down her face. I've run the analysis 3 times. There are definitely human voices in those transmissions. They're not speaking clearly, it sounds like coded messages or fragments, but they're there. Sarah felt her own eyes filling with tears. The history books had always assumed that every human on Earth had been killed during the final resistance. The possibility that some had survived, that their descendants might still be alive, changed everything. Record everything, she ordered. And, see if you can boost the signal clarity. As Kim worked to enhance the transmissions, Rodriguez called out another contact. Captain, we've got company. 3 ships approaching from Earth's direction, definitely Zephyrian configuration. The main screen showed the approaching vessels. They didn't look like traditional spacecraft, more like living creatures swimming through space. Their hulls rippled with bioluminescent patterns, and they moved with an organic grace that no mechanical ship could match. They're scanning us, Rodriguez reported. Multiple sensor sweeps, very thorough. Sarah made a quick decision. All ships, maintain current course and speed. Do not power weapons or shields. Let's see what they want. The Zephyrian ships closed to within 10,000 kilometers before stopping. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then, a new signal appeared on the communications board, not radio waves, but something far more sophisticated. They're attempting to establish a neural link, Kim warned. It's some kind of direct mind-to-mind communication. Absolutely not, Sarah said immediately. Human encounters with Zephyrian neural technology had never ended well. Standard audio communication only. After a few more minutes, the Zephyrians seemed to accept this limitation. Kim's board lit up with an incoming transmission on traditional radio frequencies. Human vessel, the voice was strange, melodic but cold, like wind chimes in a freezer. You have violated the exclusion zone established by Treaty of Exile. Withdraw immediately or face destruction. Sarah had Kim open a return channel. This is Captain Sarah Chin of the Human Free Navy. We reject the authority of the Exile Treaty. This is our home system, and we have the right to be here. The treaty is binding, the Zephyrian response came quickly. Humanity forfeited all claims to the Sol system in exchange for preservation of their species. The compact was sealed with blood and will not be broken. The compact was made under duress, Sarah shot back. Our people had a gun to their heads. That makes it invalid under any reasonable interpretation of interstellar law. There was a longer pause this time. When the Zephyrian spoke again, the voice carried what might have been amusement. Interstellar law is what we say it is, young human. Your species has had 3,000 years to accept reality. Why do you choose to reject wisdom now? Sarah felt anger rising in her chest. The arrogance of these beings was exactly what her ancestors had described. They spoke of wisdom while sitting on a world they had stolen. Because Earth is our home, she said simply. Because some things are worth fighting for, no matter the odds. Your ancestors said the same thing, the Zephyrian replied. They fought bravely and died uselessly. Are you prepared to repeat their mistakes? We're prepared to correct them, Sarah said. The channel went silent for almost a minute. When it reopened, the Zephyrian voice had changed, less melodic, more mechanical. By order of the High Council of Zephyr, you have 1 solar day to withdraw beyond the system's edge. After that time, any human vessels detected in Sol space will be destroyed without further warning. This is your only mercy. The channel closed, and the 3 Zephyrian ships began to withdraw toward Earth. Sarah opened fleet communications. Admiral Morrison, this is Chen. We've made first contact with the Zephyrians. They're giving us 24 hours to leave the system. Morrison's response was immediate. Understood, Captain. Continue your reconnaissance mission. We need those defensive scans before we make any decisions. For the next 18 hours, Sarah's task force pushed deeper into the system, dodging Zephyrian patrols and automated sentries. They mapped every defensive platform, cataloged every weapon system, and recorded the energy signatures of hundreds of alien vessels. The picture that emerged was sobering. The Zephyrians had turned Sol into the most heavily defended system in known space. Their bioships could self-repair and adapt to enemy weapons. Their orbital platforms had enough firepower to sterilize entire planets. Even with Corian support, a direct assault would be catastrophic. But Sarah's crew also discovered something else. The enhanced radio transmissions from Earth were definitely human, and they appeared to be coming from underground installations across the planet. Somehow, impossibly, descendants of Earth's original population had survived 3 millennia of Zephyrian occupation. Captain, Kim said as they prepared to withdraw, "I've been analyzing the human transmissions. I think they're not just random survivors. The signal patterns suggest a coordinated resistance network." Sarah stared at the data scrolling across Kim's screen. If there truly was an organized human resistance on Earth, everything about their mission would have to change. They wouldn't just be liberating an empty world, they would be fighting to free their own people. "Send everything to Admiral Morrison," Sarah ordered. "Full spectrum analysis, defensive positions, and, especially the human signals. He needs to know that we're not the only humans in the Sol system." As the Retribution began its withdrawal toward the fleet's position, Sarah took one last look at Earth on the main screen. Somewhere on that blue marble, humans were waiting for rescue. They had endured 3,000 years of alien occupation, keeping their culture and identity alive in the darkness. Soon, Sarah promised silently, they would see the sun again as free people. The journey back to the fleet's position gave Sarah time to think about what they had learned. The Zephyrian defenses were formidable, but not impossible to overcome. The existence of human survivors changed the tactical situation, but it also provided new opportunities. A resistance movement with 3,000 years of local knowledge could be invaluable. Most importantly, Sarah now understood that this wasn't just about human pride or vengeance. There were people counting on them, people who had never given up hope that someday, somehow, the children of Earth would return home. The 24-hour deadline was almost up. Soon the Zephyrians would begin hunting any human ship that remained in Sol space. But Admiral Morrison and the return fleet were ready for that fight. Sarah smiled grimly as Earth disappeared behind them. The Zephyrians thought they had conquered humanity 3,000 years ago. They were about to learn how wrong they had been. Admiral Morrison stood before the assembled fleet commanders in the main briefing room aboard the flagship Exodus. The holographic display behind him showed the complete reconnaissance data from Sarah's mission, painting a detailed picture of Sol System's defenses. 250 ship captains, human and Corian, listened intently as he outlined their impossible task. "The Zephyrian deadline expires in 6 hours, Morrison began. By then, every human ship in this system will be marked for destruction. They expect us to run, just like our ancestors did 3,000 years ago." He gestured to the tactical display. "They're wrong. Captain Chen's reconnaissance mission has provided us with valuable intelligence, but, more importantly, it's confirmed something we dared to hope for. There are still humans alive on Earth." Excited murmurs rippled through the assembled commanders. Morrison raised his hand for silence. "The radio intercepts are clear. Underground resistance networks have survived the occupation. They've been waiting for this day, preparing for our return. These are our people, and they're counting on us." Captain Elena Vasquez of the heavy cruiser Defiance raised her hand. "Admiral, the defensive platforms around Earth are unlike anything we've ever seen. How do we get through them without triggering a slaughter?" Morrison nodded grimly. "That's where our Corian allies come in. Ambassador Vextar, if you would explain your people's contribution." The insectoid ambassador stepped forward, his translation device humming softly. "The Corians have developed what you humans call a Trojan horse strategy. Our bioships can mimic Zephyrian technology signatures. We will approach Earth openly, as if we are their allies bringing prisoners." Admiral Morrison continued the explanation. "Half our fleet will hide inside specially modified Corian vessels. When they reach Earth's orbital space, our ships will deploy directly inside their defensive perimeter." Captain James Park of the destroyer Vengeance looked skeptical. "What about the other half of the fleet? We can't all fit inside Corian ships." "The remaining ships will execute a diversionary assault on the outer system," Morrison explained. "We'll hit their manufacturing platforms around Saturn and their sensor stations near Jupiter. While the Zephyrians respond to that threat, the infiltration force will strike directly at Earth. Sarah studied the plan carefully. It was audacious and risky, requiring precise timing and flawless execution. But it was also their only real chance of success. "What about the human resistance?" she asked. "How do we coordinate with people we've never met, using communication methods we don't understand?" Morrison smiled for the first time since the briefing began. "That's where Lieutenant Kim's linguistic analysis comes in." "Show them what you've discovered, Lieutenant." Kim stood up nervously, clearly uncomfortable speaking to so many senior officers. "I've been studying the intercepted transmissions for the past 18 hours. The resistance isn't just using random code phrases, they're speaking in what I call layered language." She activated her own holographic display, showing wave patterns and frequency analysis. They take normal conversation and embed coded information in the rhythm and structure. It's incredibly sophisticated, probably developed over centuries of hiding from Zephyrian surveillance. "Can we communicate with them?" Morrison asked. "I think so," Kim replied. "I've identified several repeating patterns that seem to be asking questions. Are you there? When will you come? That sort of thing. If I can broadcast using their same linguistic structure, they should understand that the return fleet has arrived." Morrison nodded approvingly. "Outstanding work, Lieutenant. You'll coordinate all communications with the resistance once we begin the operation." The briefing continued for another hour, covering every aspect of the complex plan. Fleet positions, attack vectors, contingency procedures, and emergency retreat routes were all carefully reviewed. By the time Morrison dismissed the commanders, everyone understood their role in humanity's greatest gamble. Sarah returned to the Retribution with a mix of excitement and dread. In 5 hours, they would either begin the liberation of Earth or die in the attempt. There was no middle ground. The Zephyrians would show no mercy to humans who broke the Exile Treaty. The ship buzzed with activity as her crew made final preparations. Weapons were charged, shields were calibrated, and emergency supplies were distributed throughout the vessel. Most importantly, every human aboard prepared themselves mentally for what lay ahead. Sarah found Commander Rodriguez in the ship's armory, checking personal sidearms with obsessive care. "How are you feeling, Miguel?" she asked. Rodriguez looked up from the plasma pistol he was cleaning. "Scared, Captain. But also ready. My great-grandfather used to tell stories about Earth, the forests of Brazil, the mountains of the Andes, the sound of ocean waves. I want to see those things for myself." Sarah understood the feeling. Every human carried stories of Earth passed down through generations. They had become more than memories, they were hopes and dreams that sustained entire civilizations in exile. "We're going to see them," she said confidently. "All of us." The hours ticked away slowly. Sarah made rounds throughout her ship, speaking with her crew and making sure everyone was ready. In the engine room, Chief Petty Officer Hassan was fine-tuning the fusion reactors with Corian-enhanced efficiency boosters. In the medical bay, Dr. Patel was organizing trauma supplies and checking the status of the ship's emergency medical systems. But it was in the junior crew quarters that Sarah found the most revealing conversation. Ensign Martinez, barely 20 years old, was talking quietly with several other young crew members. "My grandmother used to sing me songs from Earth," Martinez was saying. Old lullabies that her grandmother taught her. "I always wondered if I'd ever hear them sung under Earth's sky." Petty Officer Johnson nodded. "My family kept seeds from Earth plants in stasis. We've grown them on New Terra for generations, but they never quite looked right. Something about the soil, maybe, or the sunlight. I want to plant them in their original home." Sarah listened to these conversations and realized something important. This wasn't just about military victory or political justice. For these young people, Earth represented a connection to their deepest identity as human beings. They were fighting to reclaim not just a planet, but their souls. 2 hours before the deadline, Sarah received the deployment orders. The Retribution would be part of the infiltration force, hidden inside a massive Corian bioship called the Symbiotic Harmony. It was a nerve-wracking prospect, trusting their lives to alien technology they didn't fully understand. "All hands, this is the captain," Sarah announced over the ship's communication system. "In 90 minutes, we will begin our approach to Earth. Some of you were born on distant colonies and have never seen our homeworld. Others carry memories passed down from parents and grandparents who fled the occupation." She paused, looking around the bridge at her crew. "Whatever your connection to Earth, remember that we represent 3,000 years of human determination. We are the children of exiles who never gave up hope. Today we honor their sacrifice by reclaiming what was stolen from us." The final hour passed in tense silence. Sarah watched through the observation deck as the Retribution was carefully maneuvered into the cargo bay of the Corian vessel. The bioship's living hull closed around them like the mouth of some vast creature, sealing them into organic chambers that pulsed with alien life. "Neural interface established," reported the Corian pilot through the translation system. "We are now biologically connected to your vessel. Do not be alarmed by the sensory feedback." Sarah felt a strange tingling sensation, as if the ship around her had suddenly become alive. Corian bioships formed symbiotic relationships with their cargo, allowing for unprecedented coordination between different vessels. It was unsettling, but Sarah had to admit it was also remarkably efficient. Beginning approach to Zephyrian Patrol Zone, the pilot continued. Human vessels should power down all non-essential systems and maintain communication silence until deployment. The journey toward Earth's orbit took 6 agonizing hours. Sarah and her crew monitored the approach through the Corian ship's biological sensors, watching as they passed through layer after layer of Zephyrian defenses. Automated sentries scanned them repeatedly, but the Corian biosignatures apparently satisfied the security protocols. Finally, they reached Earth's orbital space. Through the bioship's sensors, Sarah could see the planet in perfect detail. The sight took her breath away. Earth was still beautiful, but it had been transformed beyond recognition. The Zephyrians had built floating cities above the oceans, crystalline spires that reached into the atmosphere, and vast biological processing centers that covered entire continents. Yet underneath the alien modifications, Sarah could still see the familiar outline of landmasses that had shaped human civilization. "Deployment in 30 seconds, the Corian pilot announced. Sarah opened internal communications to her crew. "All hands, prepare for combat deployment. Remember your training, trust your instincts, and fight for every human who couldn't fight for themselves." The bioship's cargo bay began to open, revealing the black space around Earth's orbit. Sarah could see other Corian vessels releasing their hidden human cargo, dozens of ships emerging from concealment like ancient sea creatures giving birth. Retribution this is Admiral Morrison. Execute Operation Homecoming. All ships, attack. Sarah felt the familiar surge of acceleration as her ship burst free from its biological cocoon. All around them, the rest of the infiltration force was emerging from hiding, weapons powering up and targeting systems locking onto Zephyrian defensive platforms. The battle for Earth had begun. Plasma fire erupted across space as human and Corian ships engaged the orbital defense stations. The Zephyrian platforms were massive and heavily armed, but they had been designed to repel attacks from outside the perimeter, not from ships that had appeared among them. "Target the communication arrays first," Sarah commanded. "We need to prevent them from coordinating their response." The Retribution's weapons opened fire, sending streams of coherent energy into the nearest defense platform. The alien structure shuddered under the assault, its biometallic hull beginning to crack and bleed luminous fluid into space. Around them, the battle was spreading rapidly. Human ships that had hidden for hours in alien cargo bays were finally free to fight, and 3,000 years of suppressed anger fueled their attack. They moved with desperate precision, knowing that failure meant not just death, but the end of humanity's last hope. Sarah watched the tactical displays as her crew coordinated their attack with other human vessels. They were outnumbered 10-1, fighting against technology they barely understood, in a battle that would determine the fate of their species. But, for the first time in 3 millennia, humans were fighting for Earth itself. And that made all the difference. The space around Earth erupted into chaos as the human infiltration fleet engaged Zephyrian orbital defenses. Sarah watched from the bridge of the Retribution as plasma fire lit up the darkness, creating a deadly light show against the backdrop of humanity's homeworld. "Direct hit on Platform 7, Commander Rodriguez reported. Their shield generators are failing." Sarah nodded, but she knew the initial surprise wouldn't last long. Already, Zephyrian reinforcements were arriving from other parts of the system, their bioships moving with organic grace through the battlefield. The aliens had been caught off guard, but they were adapting quickly. "Captain," Lieutenant Kim called out urgently, "I'm receiving transmissions from Earth's surface. The human resistance is trying to contact us." "Put it through," Sarah ordered. The speakers crackled with static, then a voice emerged, clearly human, speaking accented English. Sky warriors, this is underground control. We see your fires above us. Have you come to take us home? Sarah felt tears in her eyes at the sound. After 3,000 years, she was speaking with humans who had never left Earth. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Human Return Fleet. We've come to liberate our world. What is your situation down there? We are ready, the voice replied with fierce determination. 3,000 years we have waited. 3,000 years we have prepared. When you signal, we will rise. Before Sarah could respond, alarms began blaring across the bridge. Rodriguez's voice cut through the noise. Captain, massive energy buildup from the planet's surface. The Zephyrians are powering up some kind of planetary defense system. The main screen shifted to show Earth's surface, where enormous crystalline structures were beginning to glow with accumulated energy. Sarah realized these weren't just cities, they were weapons, capable of striking targets in orbit with devastating force. All ships, evasive maneuvers, Sarah broadcast to the fleet. Planetary weapons are coming online. The first energy beam lanced up from Earth's surface like a spear of pure destruction. The human destroyer Courage couldn't maneuver quickly enough, the beam caught her amidships, vaporizing half the ship in an instant. The remaining sections tumbled through space, trailing atmosphere and debris. Sarah felt the loss like a physical blow. Captain Torres and her crew of 200 had been friends, colleagues, fellow exiles united in the dream of returning home. Now they were gone, killed by weapons built on the very world they had died trying to liberate. They're targeting the larger ships, Rodriguez observed grimly. Those beams can't track fast-moving fighters. Sarah made a quick tactical decision. Launch all fighter squadrons. Tell them to get down to the planet's surface and find those weapon installations. As human fighters streaked toward Earth's atmosphere, Sarah opened communications with underground control again. This is Chen. We need your help. The Zephyrians have planetary weapons that are destroying our ships. Can your people guide our fighters to the installations? Affirmative, Sky Warrior, came the immediate reply. We have mapped their positions for many generations. Transmitting target coordinates now. Data flowed across Sarah's tactical displays as the human resistance shared intelligence gathered over 3 millennia. The Zephyrians had built their primary weapons into natural geographic features, mountain ranges, deep ocean trenches, and Arctic ice sheets. Destroying them would require precise strikes in heavily defended areas. Captain, Kim announced, Admiral Morrison is requesting fleet commanders for an emergency conference. Sarah transferred to the communications center, where Morrison's image appeared along with the captains of every surviving human ship. The admiral looked grim as he surveyed the remnants of his force. Report, Morrison ordered. We've lost 7 ships to planetary fire, Captain Vasquez of the Defiance reported. The orbital platforms are adapting to our weapons. Their biohulls are evolving resistance to our energy output. Sarah studied the tactical situation and came to an uncomfortable conclusion. Admiral, we can't win this fight from orbit. The Zephyrians have too many advantages up here. We need to take the fight to the surface. Morrison's expression darkened. Sarah, a planetary assault with our current forces would be suicide. We don't have enough ships to establish orbital superiority and support a ground invasion. We don't need orbital superiority, Sarah replied. We have something better, we have allies already on the ground. The human resistance has been preparing for this day for 3,000 years. If we can get troops down there to coordinate with them, we can strike at the Zephyrian infrastructure from within. Ambassador Vextar's image joined the conference from his flagship. Captain Chen speaks wisdom, the Korean said. Our bioships can serve as assault transports. We have atmospheric capability and can land directly on the surface. Morrison considered this for a long moment. Around them, the battle continued to rage as human and Korean ships tried to survive the devastating crossfire between orbital platforms and planetary weapons. How many troops can you transport? Morrison finally asked. Each bioship can carry approximately 500 soldiers, Vextar replied. With 20 vessels, we can land 10,000 troops across multiple target zones. Sarah felt hope rising in her chest. 10,000 soldiers, coordinating with resistance forces who knew the planet intimately, might be enough to cripple the Zephyrian defensive network from within. I volunteer to lead the surface assault, she said. Morrison shook his head. Sarah, you're needed on your ship, Admiral. With respect, the retribution can be commanded by Rodriguez. But, I've been studying Zephyrian tactics my entire career, and I speak the old Earth languages. The Resistance will need someone who can coordinate with them effectively. After a moment's hesitation, Morrison nodded. Very well. Captain Chen, you'll command the primary assault force. Your objective is to eliminate the planetary defense installations and establish communication with Resistance leadership. The conference ended, and Sarah began the rapid process of preparing for planetary assault. She selected 200 of her best crew members, leaving Rodriguez in command of the ship with orders to support the ground operation from orbit. Captain, Chief Petty Officer Hassan approached as Sarah checked her combat gear. Permission to join the assault team. Sarah looked at the grizzled engineer, who had served with distinction for over 20 years. Chief, I need you here to keep the ship running. Hassan smiled grimly. Ma'am, I've been dreaming about walking on Earth since I was 5 years old. Lieutenant Park can handle the engines for one day. Sarah understood the sentiment. Every human in the fleet had their own personal connection to Earth, their own reasons for fighting. Permission granted, Chief. Grab your gear. Within 2 hours, the assault force was assembled in the docking bay of the Korean bioship Living Spear. 200 humans in combat armor stood alongside their Korean allies, checking weapons and reviewing the tactical data provided by the Resistance. The bioship's pilot addressed them through speakers that seemed to grow from the living walls. Beginning atmospheric entry. Estimated time to surface, 18 minutes. Sarah felt the ship shudder as it entered Earth's atmosphere. Through the transparent sections of the hull, she could see clouds rushing past, then, the surface of the planet coming into view. It was her first glimpse of Earth from close range, and the sight was breathtaking. Below them lay the continent of North America, recognizable despite 3,000 years of Zephyrian modification. The Great Lakes still gleamed in the sunlight, though they were now surrounded by alien cities. The Rocky Mountains still rose majestically toward the sky, though their peaks were crowned with crystalline weapon installations. Landing zone approaching, the pilot announced. Zephyrian ground forces have detected us. Expect heavy resistance upon touchdown. Sarah activated her suit's communication system and addressed her troops. Listen up, everyone. In 5 minutes, we'll set foot on Earth for the first time in 3,000 years. We're going to face an enemy that thinks they own our world. Let's show them they're wrong. The bioship touched down in what had once been the state of Colorado, near the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. The hull opened like a flower, revealing the surface of humanity's birth world. Sarah stepped forward and became the first exile to set foot on Earth in 30 centuries. The gravity felt perfect, exactly what her body had evolved to expect. The air carried scents that triggered deep genetic memories, pine trees, mountain snow, and rich soil. For a moment, Sarah was overwhelmed by the simple fact that she was home. Then, Zephyrian weapons fire erupted from the surrounding forest, and the battle for Earth's surface began. Take cover! Sarah shouted as energy beams seared through the air around them. Her troops scattered, using the bioship's hull for protection while they assessed the enemy positions. Sarah's tactical display showed Zephyrian forces emerging from concealed positions throughout the area. They moved like liquid mercury, their suits allowing them to flow around obstacles and strike from unexpected angles. But they were facing human soldiers who had trained their entire lives for this moment. Hassan, get those portable shields deployed, Sarah commanded. Kim, try to raise the local resistance. We need those coordinates now. As her troops established a defensive perimeter, Sarah heard a new voice on her communication system, speaking in the coded language patterns Lieutenant Kim had identified. Sky Warriors, this is Mountain Ghost. We have eyes on your position. Zephyrian reinforcements approaching from the east. Recommend immediate relocation to prepared positions. Sarah looked around at the alien landscape, trying to spot any sign of the resistance fighters. They had become masters of concealment over 3 millennia of hiding from Zephyrian surveillance. Mountain Ghost, this is Commander Chen. We need guidance to the primary weapon installation. Can you provide escort? Affirmative, Commander. Follow the trail markers. We will guide you home. As Sarah led her troops away from the landing site, she noticed subtle signs that had been invisible at first glance. Rocks arranged in specific patterns, trees with deliberate scarring, and paths through the undergrowth that looked natural but had been carefully maintained. The resistance had transformed the entire landscape into a hidden communication network. The journey toward the weapon installation took them through terrain that was both familiar and strange. The mountains looked like the photographs Sarah had studied all her life, but they were dotted with Zephyrian structures that pulsed with alien energy. Rivers followed courses that matched ancient maps, but their banks were lined with biomechanical processing plants. Most remarkably, they began encountering other humans. The first contact came when a figure emerged from behind a cluster of trees, a woman in her 30s wearing clothing that looked like a fusion of ancient Earth styles and alien materials. She moved with the confidence of someone who knew every inch of the surrounding terrain. "Commander Chen," the woman asked in accented English. "I am Elena, daughter of the mountain clans. We have been expecting you for a very long time." Sarah stared at the woman, trying to process the reality of meeting a human who had been born and raised on Earth. "Elena, it's an honor to meet you. How many of you are there?" Elena smiled, revealing teeth that were perfectly human but eyes that held the wisdom of countless generations. "More than the Sky Stealers ever imagined. We learn to hide, to blend with their changes, to become invisible while never forgetting who we are." As Elena led them higher into the mountains, Sarah began to understand the magnitude of what the Earth humans had accomplished. They had created an entire civilization beneath the notice of their occupiers, preserving human culture while developing technologies and techniques that allowed them to survive in an alien-controlled world. The weapon installation finally came into view as they crested a ridge. It was enormous, a crystalline spire that rose from the mountain peak like a frozen lightning bolt. Energy coursed through its translucent structure, and Sarah could feel the power radiating from it even at a distance. 3,000 years we have studied this thing," Elena said softly. 3,000 years we have planned its destruction. Today, the children of Earth will finally be free." Sarah looked at the installation, then at her troops, and finally at Elena and the other Earth humans who had joined them during the climb. They were about to strike the first blow in humanity's final battle for their homeworld. "Let's bring it down," Sarah said. The assault on the weapon installation was swift and decisive. The resistance fighters knew exactly where to place the charges, which systems to target, and how to avoid the automated defenses. Within an hour, the mighty spire was collapsing in on itself, its accumulated energy dissipating harmlessly into the atmosphere. As the weapon fell, Sarah received reports from other assault teams across the planet. One by one, the Zephyrian planetary defenses were being destroyed by the combined efforts of returning humans and their cousins who had never left. "Commander," Elena said as they watched the spire's destruction, "there is something else you should know. We are not just survivors hiding in the wilderness. We are the guardians of something precious, something the Sky Stealers never found." She led Sarah to a concealed entrance in the mountainside. Beyond lay a vast underground complex that took Sarah's breath away. It was a city, built over 3 millennia by humans who refused to surrender their heritage. Art, music, literature, and science had flourished in hidden caverns while the surface world belonged to aliens. But, most amazing of all, in the center of the underground city, was a garden where earth plants grew exactly as they had before the exile. Trees that had been extinct for 3,000 years rustled in artificial breezes. Flowers that existed nowhere else in the galaxy bloomed in carefully tended soil. "We kept the seeds," Elena said simply. "We kept the memories. We kept the hope. And now you have come home to claim what was never truly lost." Sarah knelt in the garden soil, letting Earth's dirt run through her fingers. Around her, returning exiles and native survivors embraced as equals, united by their shared humanity and their love for the world that had given birth to their species. Above them, the battle for Earth continued. But Sarah knew now that humanity had already won the most important victory. They had never truly lost their home, they had simply been separated from it for a while. Now they were together again, and no force in the galaxy could break the bond between humanity and Earth.